Okay guys, we are back, and in the previous video we were working inside of our light blueprint, and we were focused on adding the components or things that are going to make up our blueprint here. So we've added our static mesh, which we've renamed to lamp fixture, and then it's an appropriate name because it looks like a lamp fixture there. And we've also added a spotlight to give us a little bit more illumination with our little blueprint light here. We've added a box collision, which will be our trigger volume that when the player enters, we can fire off events and let us know when the player has entered or exited our box collision here. And we also added a text renderer component. Now our text is currently invisible. We've set this to hidden by default, as we're going to turn this on later when the player enters this volume, letting them know how they can press a button to turn on and off our light. And that process of actually being able to turn on and off the light, we're actually going to do that in the next video. In this video, what I wanted to do instead was recreate that same setup that we did for our level blueprint. So if you recall, back in our level, we could fly into this room and turn that light on, and then we could fly out and turn it back off. If we hop up to the level blueprint here and we open it up, that script that we set up, we're going to recreate this inside of our class blueprint now. And you may be wondering again, why are we going to do this? What's the purpose of redoing this if we've already done it in the level blueprint if it works? The reason why we want to show you this is to kind of help display the modular aspect and benefits to using class blueprints. And I'll show you why here in a moment. So let's go ahead and close our level blueprint. Let's go back to our light blueprint, and let's hop over to our event graph. So we're on the event graph. And I'm going to pull this up just a little bit more, something like this, and zoom in. So we're now on our event graph, and we want to begin scripting that same functionality that we had in our level blueprint inside of our class blueprint. So how do we go about doing that? So we have our, in the background there, we have our blueprint selected. In the level blueprint, if you recall, when we selected something in the level and we opened our level blueprint, we could right-click in the graph, and the level blueprint would know that we have something selected in the level, and it would offer up suggestions for us to take on the actor that we have selected. However, with class blueprints, it's a little bit different. So we have our class blueprint selected. If we right-click in the graph, in the event graph of our class blueprint, so I'm going to right-click, notice we do not get those actions. We're getting something else. We're getting context-sensitive actions for text renderers. And the reason we're getting context-sensitive actions for text renderers is because we currently have our text renderer component selected over here. So class blueprints work similar to level blueprints. However, class blueprints are only aware of their individual components. They're not aware of the things that are placed in the level. They're only aware of their components. So if we select our box collision here, and then we right-click, now we're getting contextual actions for our box collision. And we could do the same thing for our spotlight, our lamp fixture, etc. But I just wanted to point that out because there's maybe a little bit of confusion there on why things are different versus the level blueprint versus the class blueprint. So I kind of wanted to illustrate that. So with that out of the way, we know the script that we want to create. We want to create this script of the delay. Well, actually, I want to kill those delays. We're not going to do the delays for the class blueprint version of this. We're just going to have the player overlap our box collision and toggle the visibility of our new spotlight. So that's the script that we're going to recreate inside of our light blueprint. So let's go ahead and start working on that. So again, what we're going to do, first of all, is need to get a reference to our spotlight. Now, there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. Let me maximize this a little bit more. We can take our spotlight component here, and we can left-click and drag that directly into our graph. And what this is going to do when we release is add a new node called a get node. Now, we are currently using a getter here, just as we did with the level blueprint. I know I keep hopping back to it, but just as we did here, this point light is a getter to the point light in our level. Inside of our class blueprint here, this spotlight getter is a getter for the component spotlight. So we are actually getting a reference to this spotlight component. Now from this, we can modify its properties or, again, access that visibility setting to turn our light on and off, which is what we want. Now there's a couple other things I want to show really quickly before we continue. Down below the components, down in the My Blueprint panel, you may have noticed that we have a list of our components again. These components depending on your workflow, depending on how you like to work, you could create your class blueprint, add all the components that you need to make up your blueprint, and then close the components window and no longer need to work with it. However, how would you access those components? How would you drag them into your graph and work with them? That's why they are listed here inside of the My Blueprint panel, because you can perform that same procedure of taking the spotlight and left-clicking and dragging it into your graph. However, when taking it from the My Blueprint panel, when I release here, you'll notice we're going to get a little context menu. And it's going to give us two options now. We can either get reference to our spotlight, or set reference to our spotlight. And if we choose set, we're going to get a little bit of a different node. The setter will allow us to change this spotlight to a different spotlight. So if we had another spotlight variable, we could plug that in here and say set our new spotlight to equal a different spotlight, for example. That's what the setter would do for us. We're not going to worry about the setter, so I'm actually going to delete that. But I just wanted to show that really quickly. Again, also, if you close your components window and you don't know how to get it back, you can go to the window option here from the toolbar and scroll down until you find components, and that will pop it back up for us. So I just wanted to show that really quickly, depending on your workflow. With earlier versions of Unreal Engine 4, the components window was its own separate tab, so it was not included when you were working on the event graph. So if you're on an earlier version of Unreal, you may not even see this components window. But as of, I think it's 4.6 or 4.7, this was added so that you could see it from any of the graphs that you're working on. So continuing, there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about regarding getters and setters. There's a quick shortcut that you can use. When dragging from the components window, we didn't have to actually do anything. We just left click and drag and drop it in. We can hold the Alt key while dragging in our spotlight, and that will perform a setter as well. So it's just a shortcut of quickly performing a setter or a getter. You could do the same thing from the components window down here. If you hold down Control and drag in our spotlight, that will perform a getter. If you hold down Alt and drag in, that will perform the setter. Did I say getter for this one? That's what I meant. So getters and setters. So we have a bunch of them in here. We're going to kill 4 of them here so that all we have left is our getter, because that's all we want to worry about for right now. So to toggle the visibility of our light, we kind of already know how to do this. We just need to drag off of our spotlight here and search for toggle visibility. And it's right there, ready for us. So let's go ahead and choose toggle visibility. And that's going to add the node for us. Now we need to add our overlap events for our box collision. However, before we do this, I kind of want to rename these so that they're a little bit more clearer. So it's not just box and text renderer. I think spotlight's fine. Even lamp fixture's fine too, but really it's these two. I'm just going to reselect our box trigger here before we add it, and I'm going to click on it again. It's going to give me the opportunity to rename it. So I'm going to rename this to trigger, so it's a little bit clearer. And for our text renderer, I'm going to press F2 on it now with it selected. That will also let me rename it. We're going to call this the helpful text, because this is going to be the helpful text for the player, so they know what to press when we get to that portion in a later video here. So back to our trigger here. Let's go ahead and select it now. If we right-click inside of our graph now, so I'm going to right-click inside of our graph, and now we can add events for our trigger. So let's go ahead and add our collision, and there's our overlap events. Now I kind of wanted to point this out. Notice it says on component begin overlap and not actor, because we are talking about components that we are overlapping. The actor is this light blueprint entirely. So we are talking about a component of the light blueprint actor. So let's go ahead and add a on component begin overlap, like so. And I'm going to move these down just a little bit to kind of get them out of the way there. And it's going to give us a bunch of other pins about the component that we could use to determine the types of collision that occurs with this trigger box. We're not going to worry about any of those. All we're going to do is take our executable wire here and plug that directly into our toggle visibility. Now, before we had a delay, we're not going to use that for this particular example. We just want to turn it on and turn it off when the player enters and exits our trigger volume. So I'm going to select the trigger again and going to scroll down just a little bit. Going to right click, add event for trigger under collision, and now we're adding the on component end overlap. So I'm going to select that, And just as we did before, I'm going to take the executable now, left click, and drag and plug that into our toggle visibility, like so. So our script is complete now. We can compile. Let's compile and save. And I'm going to kind of squish this back down again and zoom out so you can kind of see it like that. So it's in the background there. Now, let's test this. Let's play in the editor here. So I'm going to play. Let me make sure my sound's down. Let's play in the editor here. Now, when I run over to it, it's on by default. There's one thing that we forgot to do, actually. I made escape. Let's go back to our light blueprint here. Let's select our spotlight. And then over in the details panel, we forgot to do this. Let's actually scroll all the way down and let's find our rendering section. And there's that visible option. Let's uncheck visible. So we want it off by default. It's going to turn it off in our level, which you can see up there. So let's compile and save and then test this again. And save. And now when we play, our light is off. When we approach it, our light comes on. You can see it fires in the blueprint script there down below. When I leave, it turns it off, turns it on, and turns it off. So our script is complete. We recreated that same setup that we did for this section here. It's currently not working here because we disconnected it, but we recreated this inside of a class blueprint. Now, why did we do this? Let's take a look at why we did this here. I'm gonna hit escape. Let's actually dock all of our blueprints up here. We can close the level blueprint for now because we don't need that. But let's go back to our level here. So here's our light. What we can do now, this is the really cool part of class blueprints. With our class blueprint here selected, we can hold Alt and grab this green arrow and just drag out a copy of this light blueprint. So I'm going to go to the other side, somewhere along the back here, move it along the back. Going to hit E to enter rotation mode and rotate it 90 degrees like so. Going to hit W to go back to translation and push it up against the wall, something like this. So it's along the back side of our wall here. Now the beauty is with the class blueprints, this blueprint that we just placed should automatically work. We shouldn't have to do anything else. We can go into our play session here. We can run over to this light and turn it on and it turns on. We can run over to this one and this one comes on as well. It's kind of sticking into the wall a little bit. I guess I could move it out so it's not inside the wall. I think the light bulb's inside the wall, so let me pop it out just a little bit more. Oh, it was not on the wall at all, actually. Way to go. Let me put it on the wall, like so. So what we've done, though, is we've created a class blueprint that we can then place multiple instances without having to recreate that script. We only had to create that script once, and it just works for us. So I can now try it again. There we go. That looks a little bit better. So I can turn this one on. That one's still off. I can turn this one on. That one comes on. So that's the real power of class blueprints there. If we had done this inside of our level blueprint, what we would have had to have done is create copies of our trigger, create copies of our point light. Inside of our level blueprint here, we would have to recreate this script for each individual point light, for each individual trigger. So it just cuts down our workload by quite a bit, actually, when we're working with class blueprints. So that's actually going to cause us to pause here. We're about 13 minutes in. We're going to pause here. And again, we've worked inside of our class blueprint and set it up so that we can have multiple instances of it inside of our level. Not only that, we could take our class blueprint here and place this in an entirely new level, and it will just work automatically without having to do extra script. That's going to do it for this video. In the next video, we will begin modifying this blueprint so that we can set it up so that the player can enter the volume and press a button to turn on our light, or turn our light on and off. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you in the next video.